the new reality may be that you don't qualify for the age pension for the first 10 years of your retirement.
Age pension is not a guarantee. It is a safety net.
Start planning, be better informed, understand what the entitlement is.
Welcome back to Super Insider, your podcast for all things super and retirement. I'm Ruth, and I'm joined today by our Head of Education, Josh Van Gestel. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, Ruth Weaver, how are you?
Very good. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. Now, today's conversation is all about age pension, what it is, who can qualify for it, and most importantly, how to make the most of it. But before we get into that conversation, I do want to remind our audience that everything Josh and I discuss here today will be very general in nature. We don't know your personal circumstances, so please bear in mind that in a broad conversation like this, it is not to be interpreted as personal financial advice. All right, Josh, we work every day in the retirement world, helping lead our members to, through and during retirement. And a big piece of that is about age pension. So let's just start with some of the very basics. What exactly is it?
We have what I call the holy trinity of retirement. When we talk to members, it's probably going to fall into one of three categories. One is about how do I plan to have enough or have as much as I can. The other is how do I make sure I get some age pension? And the third is how do I make sure that I'm minimising tax in all of that? And I think we spend a lot of time focusing on the first one, maybe a bit on the third, but the age pension, I think a lot of people just take it as being a bit of maybe a right or maybe a part of their retirement that'll sort itself out. The basics of it really are that the age pension now is available to you once you turn 67. And that is for both men and women. And the only other real requirements are that you're an Australian resident and that you've been a resident here for at least 10 years.
It's changing a little bit, isn't it? Not every retiree in Australia who's 67 or beyond actually gets age pension or is striving to get age pension, because it is really designed to be a safety net, isn't it?
Can I give you some useless information?
You do that often, so go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. So the age pension, when it was introduced 115 years ago, the age of it was 65.
As in the age to qualify
The age to qualify. So barely different to what it is now. The life expectancy for a male back then was probably mid-50s. And for women, their life expectancy was about 61. So they would be very, very lucky if they qualified for the age pension. They just wouldn't live long enough. Really what you saw was the age pension was a safety net for people who lived a longer life. But we've now got male life expectancy, which is 81, and female life expectancy, which is closer to 83. It means that a lot more of the Australian population has become accustomed to having the age pension. But to your point, what we're now seeing is that although about 2/3 of people over the age of 67 qualify for the age pension, only about half of them get the full age pension. So about half of the people who do qualify are in fact getting a part pension. That's probably going to become more and more likely as superannuation and retirement savings become a more dominant part of our mix.
Yeah, so it's really important that we are positioning age pension as only one potential source of income in retirement, but also as a safety net.
That is what it's there for. It is there to really make sure where you're not self-funded or where you're not fully self-funded, that you do have some additional support. I had a discussion about a member with this. They thought when you turn 67, you have one shot. You apply for the age pension, you either get it or you don't. And she was very surprised by the fact that I said, well, the new reality may be that you don't qualify for the age pension for the first 10 years of your retirement. Or you might qualify for a part pension now and get the full pension later on. And so it's really important that we think about our retirement income actually being three things. It'll be your superannuation balance. You'll be drawing into it or drawing down from it more or less. You might have some employment income coming in and out. And you might also have your age pension ebbing and flowing as well.
Okay, so let's recap then who actually qualifies for age pension or what those criteria are. You need to be at least age 67 or above. You need to be a permanent resident of Australia and you need to have lived here for at least 10 years. That's
correct.
The first set of criteria. And if you can tick those three boxes.
And for that 10 years, 5 years of that has to be consecutive.
Brilliant. So I've ticked those three boxes. What's the next hurdles, I guess, I've got to get over then? What happens after you've ticked those three?
I want you to talk about at least this at a top level because you've got a beautiful gag. Means testing.
The means testing. They call it means testing because, as we say, the worst result is the one they'll use. So it's pretty mean.
Yeah.
So when we do talk to members, as we always say, look, age pension is not a guarantee. It is a safety net. And, you will be assessed across two different criteria generally at the outset. And you'll be assessed based on your income. You'll be assessed based on your assets. So just give us some insights into that process, the income and asset testing.
So you'll always go through the income test first, and it's the one that most people actually pass. When you're moving into retirement, you're not generating a lot of income. Employment probably isn't a big feature anymore. You might have some income coming from different investments, but most people who do qualify for the age pension get through the income test without too much issue. Once you pass the income test, you then go through the assets test. The assets test will effectively look at everything you own, bar a couple of things. They'll exclude the family home. So whether you live in a home worth $500,000 or worth $4 million, your principal residence is ignored. They'll also ignore if you're part of a couple and your partner or spouse, if they're under the age of 67 and they have a superannuation balance, that will also be ignored. And there's also a couple of other things around loans and things like that that will be excluded. But otherwise, everything that you own, everything that you earn will be counted as part of the means test. As you said, the worst result is actually what's going to determine your amount of age pension. And usually that's going to be driven more by where you land on the assets test than the income test. The other thing to think about with those, though, is both the means tests will have what they call a threshold and a cutoff. So if you own assets or you own income under that threshold, you'll qualify for the full amount of age pension. If you go over the threshold, it will start to reduce gradually, which is where we talk about part pension. And then when you get to the cutoff, it means you get nothing. The important thing about, though, when people hit the cutoff that they get nothing, I think we have to keep in mind that you might still be entitled to things like Commonwealth Health Card, but it's also thinking that means that you're actually fully self-funded. I think we should more and more be celebrating those people who just don't need the age pension. Certainly, I know we've talked about it, that in the first 10 years or so of our retirement, I actually hope I don't qualify.
Exactly. I'm in exactly the same boat. I hope I don't qualify for it because if I don't, I will regard that as myself being successful financially enough to be able to write my own retirement story, retire when I want, generate the income that I think appropriate. And there is a likelihood if I do live a long, healthy, prosperous retirement, then I might end up qualifying for it as I'm getting older and hopefully have had a wonderful few years spending a lot of my hard-earned.
And even to that point, you think about the age pension as a safety net. It's not a lot. It's an amount that's determined by the government. The government determines the rules around it, how much you'll get. When it comes to your super, especially if you've planned well and if you are in a position that you're largely self-funded, for example, you're the one in control of it. You're the one setting the income. So I think it's also a measure of success with being self-funded is also that you can set your own lifestyle and income.
For those individuals who potentially don't qualify for the full age pension and might find themselves qualifying for part age pension. What are some other considerations there that might influence their eligibility or the amount that they qualify for?
And this is where we do get a lot of members who are talking to us who maybe are on the cusp a bit and thinking about, well, is there a way that I can qualify, or is there a way I can qualify for some more? There's a couple of key areas I'd probably suggest that you focus on. We have a lot of information about this on our website. The first is around gifting. Often we have people ask, well, can I give some of my money and
I'm available for gifting, by the way, if anyone wants to gift to me.
I'll move on quickly. But if you gift $10,000 a year, that's allowable. But up to a maximum of $30,000 every 5 years. The government obviously doesn't want you gifting money away, but it is a consideration. It is a way to actually first think about if you're on the cusp, is gifting something that you can think about, or how's it featured? Because a lot of people, we hear a lot more about people wanting to give living bequeathment, would that be the right phrase?
Bequeathment.
But actually giving their money away while they're alive.
And particularly to those kids who might be trying to buy their first properties and things like that, how difficult it is to get into the market. You see a lot of it.
So it is becoming more common. So that's why gifting is probably both a consideration for how it's assessed, but also a consideration for those part pensioners. The other one, and this is one that's coming to the spotlight a bit more in the last 12 months, is deeming rates. We're seeing volatility in the markets. We have superannuation balances go up and down. We've got all sorts of things that are going up and down. The government doesn't reassess your balances every day. They don't look at volatility today and change your age pension as a result. What the government will do is pretty much make a review or an assessment of your age pension twice a year, generally each February and each August, and they use what's called a deeming rate. So they'll add up everything that you have in superannuation, in investments, in shares, and they'll apply a deeming rate that is basically an assumed investment earning rate. It means that when it was a lower deeming rate, you could have actually been earning a higher amount in your investments that was almost being disregarded for age pension purposes. But you're seeing the government now moving that up. That becomes very important because as the deeming rate goes up, it obviously basically determines that you're earning more income. So for anyone who's a part pensioner, that can start becoming a feature, effectively getting less age pension.
So it's a good pick-up and a good reminder to our listeners that there isn't anything you have to do yourself to be reassessed by Services Australia. This is something that's going to happen on your behalf twice a year. If, however, there is a big shift to your personal circumstances, maybe something unforeseen has happened, the passing away of a spouse, for example, can somebody then approach the government themselves and say, look, a month ago I was assessed and I didn't qualify, something big has happened. How does somebody go about doing that?
The government suggests that if you've had a major change in circumstances, you've got 14 days to notify them. So if you're already an age pensioner, that's very important. You have to let them know as soon as possible in case there needs to be an adjustment made. You don't want to leave that too long that you then find you're in a situation you've been overpaid or things like that, that you're having to refund money. But within that 14 days, if you're not qualifying for the age pension and circumstances have changed significantly, or even that you've found that you've been depleting your superannuation balance and you think you might now be in a position to think about the age pension, absolutely. This isn't you turn 67, you apply. This can be that you turn 70, you turn 75, whatever age it may be that you decide to then approach Services Australia and apply. There's lots of tools, there's calculators out there, including on our website, that can help you think about your age pension determination. So if you don't qualify initially, don't just forget about it. It's a really good part of your retirement plan to check in every now and then.
It's always a good pulse check for people to use those calculators, not for an exact science, but maybe to get a bit of an insight as to at what point, assuming nothing major happens, am I likely to qualify?
Absolutely. And I think, Ruth, like any part of your retirement plan, by thinking about the age pension and doing that calculator or doing that investigation, doing that planning, you might go, well, yes, I'm going to qualify, and that's part of my income needs.
yeah.
And you
that's
can
part of the
lock
plan.
that in.
Yeah.
Or you might look at it and go, well, I'm not going to qualify. How am I feeling about that? And we're both quite positive about that. Or you might actually then fall into, which I think is the really important part of the population, where you go, well, actually, I'm going to be a part pensioner, it looks like, just in terms of running those calculations or thinking about it. Then it becomes important for you to think about, well, how do I make sure that I am qualifying if I do need to shift a few things, or how do I make sure I'm qualifying for as much as I can?
So what is the first tip you would give people who are getting close to this stage?
Start planning, be better informed, understand what the entitlement is and how you might be able to access it and how it might apply to you. I find it interesting as a person in their young 40s, Ruth, that you're already thinking about the age pension. Yes, I was being generous. But you are actively thinking about the age pension. And it's not to say that it's a major thought for you, but it is part of what you should be doing with your retirement plan. When you do then get really close, 13 weeks is the sweet spot. If you know you're going to retire, if you know you're going to turn 67, think about applying to Services Australia for the age pension. You can do that 13 weeks in advance. It gives them time to process. It gives time for you to assess any paperwork or do anything that you need. It's not you at the finish line of your 66th year or of work trying to sort all of this out. So 13 weeks is actually a long time. Don't leave it to the last minute. I'd actually say get in and doing that as soon as possible. The other thing which we talked about was if circumstances change, particularly if you are an age pension recipient, that 14 days, make sure that you're providing an update.
So seeking help is obviously the last point we would reiterate for the audience. And help can come in different forms. So help can be used self-helping by going to particular tools and information and websites and having a bit of an insight. But there are other channels. You could seek financial advice around how to best structure your financial assets to increase your likelihood of qualifying, as well as talking to a financial information services officer at Services Australia. These are wonderful individuals who really are there to help you qualify for your maximum entitlement. So just give us a quick recap on the types of resources and help that's available.
Our own website has some incredible up-to-date information as well as calculators. Use that to inform yourself. So at least then if you're having those discussions with an advisor or Services Australia, you're going with already some awareness or some understanding of the questions you may have. When you plan for retirement, we actually want you to raise more questions. Okay, not necessarily get all the answers. That's what I'd actually say with the age pension. Inform yourself so you start raising some of these questions that you need answers to, and that's what you then talk to Services Australia or an advisor or seek out information on.
And the key is to plan early, because if there are financial strategies that you can implement to maximize your entitlements, sometimes those strategies may need a bit of time to implement. So waiting until your 66th birthday or, to the cusp of 67 before, you qualify on an age basis, it might be too late. So it is really important to start that conversation well before you turn 67 to allow for time.
And probably the last thing I'd say is even that planning early allows you to, as I said earlier, think about, will I actually qualify and be okay? And do I just set and forget it? Will I not qualify, and how do I feel about that? Is that something that I'm happy about, that I'm going to be self-funded? But then again, if I'm that person that falls in between those, early planning is very, very crucial.
Well, it is a big conversation. There's a lot of detail that come attached to this. So I would encourage our audience to hop on our website, hop on the Services Australia website, and continue to inform yourself, learn more, and continue to engage in the conversation. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap things up here. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, my last thought would be back to the first thought. My comment about the Holy Trinity when it comes to retirement. We've talked today a bit about planning. We've talked about the age pension. We haven't talked much about the third one, Ruth.
Which is tax, am I right?
It is tax,
Well,
yes.
don't worry, because Anne will be up next in our next episode, and she'll discuss all things tax and tax hacks.
Wasn't that a nice little segue?
Tax and tax hacks. So look forward to Anne in the next episode. Be sure to tune in, and I look forward to being back with you again in the near future. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Ruth.